Hey YouTube, Poobslag here, and this is TurboFat, an open source game I'm making in the Godot engine. You can find a link to the source code at the GitHub page in the description below. And this month I've added a prologue and epilogue to help the story along. I've also made some changes to the overworld and added a couple new levels. So let me tell you what I've been doing. So I changed the overworld a lot. Here's what it used to look like. It's got your restaurant in the middle here, your rival's restaurant if you go down this path and through this fence is over here, and then a whole bunch of houses and paths and decorations and things like that that don't really have any gameplay effect. They were just there to, for filler for now. But rather than having all that stuff, I just decided let's keep it simple. Here's your restaurant, here's your rival's restaurant, and everything's just in one compact place. And the result is when you're playing the game and you're just running around, there's stuff everywhere. You'll find a level or a person to talk to, and you don't have to go searching for everything. It's a little more fun, I think. So I added a little prologue to explain the story at the start of a chapter. This is sort of like if you played games like Super Mario 3, Super Mario World, there's that little bit at the beginning where it tells you like, oh, the princess has been captured or whatever. So it has just a little text box, a new text box I made. And then some dialogue between the main character and your little sidekick. And sometimes you'll stop and talk to them and say something, and then you'll stand up and keep walking again. So all that logic takes place in this new overworld walk scene, which just is a long strip of land with the two characters up here. They start up here and then they walk and walk and walk until they hit a stopping point, and then they just stop. And they're like, okay, we've walked far enough. So it's not infinite, but the walking logic also has an edge case you might not have expected, which is that because in the creature editor you can make your character very fat, in which case they walk slower. I had to account for like what if they walk at different speeds. We can't have the sidekick get really far ahead, and we don't want you to like outrun them either. So I had to add some logic to keep them close together so that you'll pause and let them catch up, and vice versa. They'll pause and let you get further ahead sometimes. The other wrinkle is I wanted the characters to be able to emote while they were walking, but the walking animation, or at least some of them, involve you like moving your hands. And so the first thing that happened was, they already had emotes saying like, oh, I'm scared, let me like put my hands to my face, or I'm not sure, I'll put my hand up here. And they would have like 4 or 3 arms, just like their walking arms and their emoting arms. So I had to fix that. But yeah, the result looks pretty good. I'm happy with it. I also added 2 new level rules, which change how line clears work for certain levels. In this level, the cleared lines just stay empty, but the whole playfield shifts down. This means if you make any snack or cake boxes at the bottom of the screen, you need to clear them quickly, or they'll disappear without scoring you any points. It also punishes single line clears, which leave awkward gaps in your playfield. On this level, clearing a line just leaves everything where it was. It's severely punishing, and honestly, I still haven't learned how to play it optimally. I feel like going for horizontal strategies where you keep tucking stuff in the same 3 rows and going for triple line clears works best. So I wanted to have some levels where garbage is constantly rising from the top even while you're placing a piece. It doesn't wait for you, it just is always in your way. And so that introduced a few little edge cases related to timing, right? Like in race conditions. So you can see this line clear animation. It empties the line, waits for a moment, and then drops stuff in to fill the gap. But what happens if there's a line that got inserted while that was happening? It might erase line 6 or something, and then everything shifts up 1, so line 6 is now line 5. And then instead of filling the gap, it would move the wrong lines down, and it would shift the gap down instead of filling the gap with the stuff above it. So that's one obvious edge case, but there's a bunch of others. There's probably like 7 or 8. You could be like just like moving a piece around down here, and a line gets inserted, and now your piece needs to move. You can see your shadow down here where your piece is going to land. That needs to move. So there's a million little things that need to happen when a line gets inserted. So rather than writing a million little lines of code in one place, I thought, well, let's use signals here. So Playfield has a generic line inserted signal, which is listened to, for example, by the line clear logic. And the line clear logic says, hold up, if a line got inserted and I was in the middle of clearing lines, I need to shift all those calculations up a row so that I don't mess up and move the gap like I was describing earlier, the first edge case. The piece stuff is handled a little differently because the piece logic, the logic for like moving the piece and shifting the piece and doing squish moves, that's all in one place. It's all in one like little scene here, piece manager. And this is not specific to line clears because later on I anticipate adding a lot of levels where things like gaps get added or pieces get inserted or there might be a little snake that chases you, or I don't know. But the playfield's going to change in all sorts of ways. So I have a generic piece disturb signal, which just means something might have changed in the playfield, so just figure all the stuff out about the piece again. So that, for example, the piece dropper, the thing that calculates where the shadow goes, where it knows like, oh, your piece is going to drop here. Well, if a line gets inserted now, that piece disturb signal goes off, and it'll recalculate where the piece will drop. So I think this is really generic and should work for a lot of different scenarios. I'm really happy with this design. So I wanted to have some levels with a cheese mechanic where the amount of garbage on the screen is fixed. So it doesn't rise by itself, but if you clear a line, then it'll rise up to fill the gap. And that's only if you clear one of the garbage lines. So if I clear a regular line up here, that does not trigger it, and it will stay put. So I already had sort of my level framework for like the things triggering other things had logic for stuff like if a line is cleared, trigger this, but it didn't have the idea of parameters of saying if a line is cleared in this part of the screen, then trigger something. So I had to add the idea of parameters, and then I had to add the idea of parsing these expressions. So you can say when a line is cleared and the y coordinate of that line is 0 through 5, right? It's in the bottom section of the screen, then trigger something. And then the parsing logic was sort of fun to write. I basically have a parser which looks for the commas and hyphens in that expression and uses those to split apart, figure out the lower and the higher parts. And as usual, I wrote a nice little suite of comprehensive unit tests to show all the edge cases work. And for example, if you say, I care if line 1 and 4 through 6 are cleared and it should trigger something, which I will never do. But just in case it does handle and it shows, well, that means this line doesn't trigger it. These lines do trigger it. So yep, nice and unit tested. So I wanted to have some levels where you can't make boxes, just to make the player have to adapt and score in a different way. So I have these veggie pieces. You can sort of tell it's subtle, but like the red ones are little tomatoes and they have tomato stems. The brown ones are croutons, and the greens are leafy spinachy things. So I drew those by using these same veggie cube textures. These are already in use for places like when you clear a line but you don't use the entire piece, it would turn into these veggie cubes. So I used these textures to make, let me see, so here's the original texture, and then I just overlaid and tiled that onto the piece shapes, and the result is, if you have your regular pieces here that you can see, these are their veggie equivalents. And they look nice and healthy, and you have like the green ones, the croutons. I don't know, I think it's really a cute little touch. So at the end of every level, the game grades you based on like your speed compared to a perfect player. And it'll say, they are very fast, and you're mostly that fast, so I'll give you an S on your speed. And in other categories, like they made a lot of boxes, but you didn't make so many, so I'll give you a C on your boxes. But those marks for where a perfect player could play this level, I had to manually tweak those per level. Like manually, and the way I was doing that was just playing the level a bunch and seeing what grade it gave me, and then saying like, well, I'm doing pretty good on boxes and it's still giving me a B, so I have to tweak the knobs one way and say, well, now it's giving me too good a grade, now tweak it back. So it was tedious. I had to keep playing over and over. So I made this little program which will extract my scores for a given level and compare them to how I usually play, and I can see, for example, this is the level where when you clear lines they just get erased and nothing drops, and it says, well, on average you are playing 1.21 seconds extra per piece. You are playing that much slower. Instead of dropping like 90 pieces per minute, now you're like 20 pieces. Right? You are slow, but you are making a lot more boxes than normal. So I can use those to tweak these knobs for me. And here's like a different level, for example, just so you can see. This is the one where garbage is constantly rising, and it'll say, well, when garbage constantly rises, you actually play faster than normal. So you don't need any extra time per piece, but you do not make any boxes or combos. You're like half as many boxes as normal, 60% as many combos, and I can feed those back into the levels, so it'll grade other people appropriately too. It'll say for everybody else, it's okay if you're not getting many combos on this level because nobody can. So that's where we're at going into September. We've got the prologue and epilogue story stuff done. We've added a few new level mechanics, and we've fleshed out the level engine to where it's getting easier and easier to add more mechanics. So I really like where it's going. I love the design. But one problem is the levels we've been adding have been incredibly punishing, where like they're all just making it harder to play the game, making it harder to get high scores. I want to add the opposite. I want to add a few rewards to the game where it's like, oh, on this level, there are some little candy pieces you can pick up by moving your piece around, right? Or maybe there's, instead of like garbage rows rising, maybe there's like cake rows that are easy to eliminate and score you bonus points. So I want to add some nice reward levels, and I also want to spice up the end of level grading screen when it tells you your grade. I want it to just have a little bit more spice and pizzazz, and like, instead of just having like a little A in a small font, maybe like a big A and it's like colorful. I don't know, if you played Beautiful Joe, they really had that grading system down. It was so fun to play and so rewarding when you got a good score finally. So that's all coming next month. Overall though, I'm loving working on like the gameplay part of this, because when you're trying to tweak gameplay, you get to play your game, and that's the fun part. When you're working on tweaking like the story or the graphics, it's a little tedious at times. You don't really get to play very much. It feels more like work and less like making a game. So yeah, it has been a lot of fun lately. I'm looking forward to next month, and I hope you are too. I hope you'll join me, and I hope you'll come back to my little YouTube channel here. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys later.